Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and this is a vlog of my unmasking experience after my late autism and ADHD diagnosis. And I made a TikTok yesterday because I saw somebody talking about skill regression. And as I was making the TikTok, I was like, that'd be a really good one to do as a full-length video. I do have previous videos on skill regression, but like I said, this is kind of my cats are fighting. This is a vlog of my unmasking journey, and so it's been a while since I've talked about it. So, and there's been changes, so I thought it'd be good to talk about it again. I'm looking behind me. I didn't straighten out my stuffed animals on my couch. Oh well. I don't know. Some days when I sit down to do videos, I try to make everything look perfect behind me. And some days I literally flip on the camera and just start talking. And that's today. Oh, I did want to show you. My shirt says, "Be in awe of my autism." There's a raccoon and an opossum on a flying carpet. And I don't understand the symbolism of the animals, but they are just kooky enough that I thought it was fun. I also need to get WD-40 for my office chair. Now that we got all of those little ADHD stray thoughts out of my head. So basically, okay, first off, let's talk about what skill regression is. So you hear about it in autistic kids quite often. A lot of times you'll hear parents say that they thought they had a typical child and they were meeting their developmental milestones, and then all of a sudden the kid had a regression. Sometimes they were potty trained and they stop using the toilet. Sometimes they have a verbal regression. Sometimes they have a social regression where they were, getting along age appropriately with other kids. And then suddenly they pretty much lost the social skills, how to navigate with other kids. That one I don't hear about as often. But anyway, so there's just various, sometimes there's food regressions, like the kid was eating well and then suddenly, is having trouble eating. So you hear about it often in kids, but you don't hear about it as much in late diagnosed adults, partly because, it's only recently that many of us have been diagnosed. It's not that skill regression didn't happen in adults. It would get put off as other things, other mental health crises, and it wasn't tied to an autistic skill regression. Because you kind of have to be diagnosed autistic first for that to happen, right? So I'm trying to, okay. There's two ways I kind of want to think about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the way that I heard skill regression brought up to me, and then a little bit about how this other lady was talking about it, and see if it relates to any of y'all from that perspective. And they might be really kind of actually one and the same, talked about with different words. I'm not really sure. So basically, I started having a skill regression when I hit an autistic burnout. And I got diagnosed right around the time I was having this autistic burnout. But it also was just kind of a coincidence because I was also getting diagnosed around the time that my teens were having autistic burnout, which is why they got diagnosed. So I was really focused on my teenagers. And that's when I started learning about autism. And then I realized, oh, this is me too. So it kind of all happened together. And after I got my diagnosis, I was really kind of at the height of my burnout. And because I had been masking for 40 plus years. And all of a sudden, my nervous system could not handle that anymore. And so that's kind of when burnout will happen, where it can mimic the symptoms of depression, and where you just basically like are struggling to function. And then that's when skill regression can come in, and you can kind of like see how burnout and skill regression might be related. And I think that's the same thing for little kids too. You might not think of a toddler getting burnt out, but if they are doing their little toddler skills and struggling to keep up with all the like, oh yeah, you potty trained and you're so good and you did this, and they're like struggling to like keep getting that praise from their parents, and no fault of the parents, because that's what you do when your kid uses the bathroom. You congratulate them, but it's still, they are working up to their maximum capacity, and all of a sudden their brain is like, this is all too much, and then they have burnouts and they have skill regressions. So I started having skill regression in a couple of different areas. One was in the kitchen. Before my diagnosis, before I hit autistic burnout, I was really like, cooking was really my special interest since I was a teenager. And I'd even started a cooking YouTube channel. And I really loved cooking. I love teaching cooking. That's why I started the YouTube channel. But then suddenly again, like skill regression, things that used to be so easy for me to do, I was struggling with. I was burning food. I was undercooking food. I was forgetting about food in the pantry and refrigerator and letting ingredients expire, which is a skill. It takes talent. Well, not talent, but like awareness, like intentionality, to make sure that you're using all of your ingredients in a timely manner. That's a struggle for people with ADHD, which I'm also diagnosed with. So I was overcompensating to make sure that I was using all these ingredients correctly, but overcompensating leads to burnout, right? So all of a sudden I would open up the fridge and like find chicken that was expired, or that kind of thing. One skill that I was really good at is if you're making a main dish and like two sides and, different components, and having them timed where everything is finished cooking at the same time. So when you serve your plate, everything's hot. That's a skill. A lot of new cooks struggle with that. And that was something that I got really good at over the years. And then suddenly I couldn't do that anymore. I was serving cold broccoli because the chicken was taking longer than I like. And it was so baffling to me, because these are things that I just did without even thinking about before. And now I was not only struggling, but failing to do these things that were so easy to me before. And at that point, I hadn't heard anybody talking about skill regression in adults. So I had no idea what was going on, but it was really like, it was just really frustrating, because I'm like, why is this happening? And then when you're in burnout and everything's hard and everything feels sluggish and I was tired all the time, that didn't help, right? And another area that I had a skill regression in was filling out like forms, government forms, medical forms, that kind of thing. Never used to be a problem for me before, but now when I try to look at forms, I'm not dyslexic, but specifically when I'm looking at forms, it's like the words just don't want to go into my brain. Everything looks jumbled. I will overthink every single question. I can't, I will miss spaces on a form. Like my eyes just don't even see that question. I will misinterpret the questions. I will put the information in the wrong spots. Like, it's really weird because, because these are things that were not hard. And when I say it, it's like, these don't sound like they were hard, but all of a sudden, this is something that I've been struggling with. And that one hasn't got that much better, like maybe a little bit, but the cooking has improved. And that's what I want to kind of talk about in this video. And so the way that when I finally was like learning about skill regression and heard about it from somebody else, the way that they explained it made so much sense to me. They basically said that when you learn a skill, your brain maps it, like this is where that skill is stored in your brain. And then there's neural pathways, connecting all this information in your brain. And so when you use that skill, your brain fires those neurons into those neuron pathways, and then you do the thing. Well, when you are in burnout, your cortisol levels and adrenal glands and all of that cause stress in your body and your brain. And those neural pathways can either kind of like fade away, disconnect, get disrupted. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I might be saying the wrong language, but I'm hoping you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. Like, so the information's still there, but the pathways to get to that information can stop working correctly. Well, so ideally, to come out of burnout, you really have to work on re-regulating your nervous system. So, which is one reason why getting diagnoses are so vital. Because if you don't know that you're autistic, then you're going to be living in this ableistic society, and you're going to be pressuring yourself to keep masking. But once you realize you're autistic and you realize that masking, how harmful it is, because that's, what leads to burnout, you can like work on unmasking and regulating your nervous system by using fidgets when you need to. I've got a weighted blanket underneath my crocheted blanket under there. So sometimes I just need the sensory of a weighted blanket, wearing earplugs or headphones. Having downtime, that's one that's been so frustrating for me to have to reconcile in my head, because, my Christmas was pretty chill, but it still changes your routine. And, so that's another thing, keeping to routines helps regulate your nervous system. But so after Christmas, yesterday was the day after Christmas, and I hardly did anything at all. And I had to have that downtime to basically re-regulate so then get back on track. And realizing how much downtime I need after events has been very eye-opening to me, and sometimes can be really frustrating, because I can have in my head planned out, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And now I can tell my body's no, you're not, because if you keep pushing through, you're going to regret it, and then you'll need even more time to because otherwise I will have a meltdown or I will have a shutdown. So it's either listening to when I'm feeling so I was diagnosed a little over 2.5 years ago. Over that time, I kind of can hear and listen to my body when it's feeling like it's being pushed more. So I know, okay, I need to step back and chill. So re-regulating your nervous system by doing all of these self-accommodations. It's nothing from the government. I also am finally on ADHD medicine. And I have an anxiety pill that I can take as needed. I don't really take it very often, but I have that as in my toolbox as a regulation tool. I should have taken one on Christmas, actually. I didn't think about it. See, I don't use my anxiety medicine to the fullest of its extent, because I forget that I have it prescribed to me now. It's not something I'm used to thinking about as a tool to reach for. I've gotten a lot better at grabbing my fidget toys. Having my fidget really helps me so much at when I'm at my book club. when I'm making my videos, sometimes when I'm just like watching TV, like I have to have something to do with my hands. So I'll either embroider but if I don't feel like that, I'll use my fidget, and it helps just keep me regulated. I don't know, having something to do with my hands. So where was it going with that? So regulating your nervous system helps your brain be able to heal and create new neural pathways to the skills that are there. So you don't necessarily actually lose the skill, although I have heard that sometimes that does happen for people. I don't know if they just completely lose the access to it or if somehow that part of the brain itself gets damaged. Again, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know. But as your body is regulating, that skill is there. So it's like it for the most part, so you can build new neural pathways to access that skill again. And so it may not look the same as how you did it before because you are accessing it through a new network through your brain. This is how it's explained to me, and it really feels like my lived experience is like anecdotally, yeah, that makes sense to me. Because I have been getting better at cooking again now that it's been, 2.5 years. And that is a relief because, cooking is a life skill that would be really frustrating to lose. But my cooking does look different. I do a lot more simple meals than I ever used to. And I take a little bit more time to cook than I used to. So I am, because I'm like, not, oh, and I have to use a meat thermometer when I never used to be able to. Like I used to just intuitively understand when the meat was ready. But now I use that as a tool to make sure that I'm cooking meat to the proper temperature. So I am regaining the skill that I had like a big regression on, but it is looking a lot different. Now the forms I still struggle with, but like cooking I do every single day, several times a day. Filling out medical or government forms isn't something that I do as often, so it kind of makes sense that it might be something that I'm still struggling with when it comes up. Other autistic people adults I've heard, lose skill around driving. Oh, another one is like, I have college education, but I'm struggling to read more dense nonfiction than I used to. Like I used to be able to read nonfiction without any kind of problem with comprehension. But now I still can, but it's not as easy for me as it used to be. And so I've heard that's another one for people with skill regression. Social, like some autistic people have a skill regression in like understanding and using small talk, where it's like they used to be like, I used to be able to just go into a room and talk to people because I was masking so highly, and now I can't. So comment below, like if you've noticed skill regression after having an autistic burnout, and if you feel like sharing what that was and where you are, and if you've gotten any kind of like of that skill back. Then, so the TikTok I saw, the other lady, the way she explained it was that when you learn the skill, you are in a specific state and you're masking, right? If you're an autistic person, you learned it while you were masking. And as you are unmasking, then you might have a skill regression because now you are in a different state. And at first, when she explained it that way, I thought it was different than what I was talking about, the neural pathways. But in a way, it kind of might be just a different way to say the same thing, because you learn the skills, like I said, when you were masking. But then when you have a burnout, So hold on, I'm trying to figure this out because like she never really mentioned burnout. She just mentioned getting a diagnosis and working towards unmasking. So if for some reason you got a diagnosis without going through a burnout, because it could happen, especially with awareness of people sharing about autism on the internet, you might go get an autism diagnosis because you recognize all the traits before you hit burnout. Wouldn't that be amazing? But then you might start to intentionally unmask, but you never had to go through a burnout. That could also, again, I guess, you might still have that skill regression because you are now trying to access those same skills in a new version of yourself, not from your masked version. So you're not using the same neurons to fire to access those skills because now you're trying to access them in a unmasked way. And that makes sense. I could see that like with a small talk, like when you're masked up, you start doing a certain way, those neurons are automatically going to fire. But now if you're going into a situation and you're like, I'm not going to mask, but I still want to talk to these people. Oh, wait, what do I say? What do I do? I don't have access to that small talk because I'm not going to do it in my like mask. That makes sense. So I could see that. So I think there could be some overlap in how she said it and the way that I was explained, but also if you didn't have a burnout, I could also still see a skill regression happening because you're having to learn new ways to do those old skills. See, I love doing these videos because when I talk things out loud, that's how I tend to process and have like, I get it now. Like it was kind of making sense, but until I worked it through. So bringing y'all along the ride with me as I figure things out too. So is there anything else I wanted to say? Overall, since my diagnosis and unmasking, I don't, there's not really a hard definition of like, oh, burnout, not burnout. And I think like, you could be doing really, really well for a while and then like something kind of resets you and you might kind of slip back into like a burnout mode. For a while there, it was a very up and down for me. I'd have good days and bad days. Then it was like, okay, good week. And then like a bad week. Lately, I am not feeling as burnt out as I, did. But I definitely still have harder weeks or moments or, so I don't know fully if I'm out of burnout. But I'm definitely not where I was. So that is good for sure. I know for a while in the beginning, there was months where I was like, is it ever going to get better? And it is definitely better. So, if you are newly diagnosed or you're newly like realizing you're in autistic burnout, please have hope. It does get better. I'm pretty sure there was videos early on in the channel where I'm like, is this ever going to get better? And I have no regrets about getting my autism. Like the autism diagnosis literally changed my life, saved my life. Understanding it and having the language and then being able to do all these things, awesome. And I don't have any like upset or sadness that I am autistic. I am glad I'm autistic. I like being autistic. There are some difficulties. Having the pathological demand profile of autism, which I've got more videos on that. That's really hard to live with. And then separate from my autism, my memory disorder, I've got a playlist that explains that, is really, really hard to live with. Like I like being autistic. If I could not have my memory disorder, I probably would have preferred that. I don't want to cure for my memory disorder, I don't think, because if somehow, I don't know if I store autobiographical memories or not. I don't have autobiographical memories. If you're new here, I don't know if they're stored in my brain and I just don't have neural pathways to access them. This is a lifelong memory disorder. So ever since I was a child, no access to any autobiographical memories. So I don't know if I don't make them or if I just can't retrieve them. But let's say they are stored in my brain somewhere and I just can't retrieve them. If suddenly someone turned on a switch and I suddenly could, I think that would be insanely overwhelming. If you've never been able to access your memories and all of a sudden you have them all or most of them, I can't imagine how I would even begin to process that. Like, that's crazy. But if I, could have had a magic wand and like, oh, you're autistic, but you don't have a memory disorder, that would be great. I like being autistic. I don't like that our society still stigmatizes autism so much. That is what needs to change, not autism. We need more awareness, more accessibility, more, sorry, got a delivery. Awareness, accessibility, advocacy, and accommodations. I'm looking at another, it's an A word. Accommodations for autism and for people to understand that it is actually... Watson, go to your bed. And for people to realize that it is an actual disability that needs accommodations just like any other disability. Watson, it's just a delivery guy. It's fine. Shh. Also, keep in mind, being disabled is not negative. It's morally neutral. It's just a different expression of the human experience, right? Until the next video, guys. Bye.